Hello, this is the video for Chapter 4, Section 1. Remember to fill in your notes as we go, and you may pause the video if you need to make sure that you're getting everything. Chapter 4 is about ecosystems and communities, and the first lesson we're going to cover in this chapter is going to be Chapter 4.1, and it is about the role of climate. The learning objectives for this chapter are as follows. Make sure you get these written down, please. First, we're going to identify the causes of climate. Then we're going to explain how Earth's temperature range is maintained. And we're going to identify Earth's three main climate zones. So first off, what is climate? Well, the weather that we see out there every day, if it's sunny, if it's rainy, if it's snowy, that weather, that is the day-to-day condition of Earth's atmosphere at a particular time and place. Climate itself refers to the average year after year conditions of temperature and precipitation in a particular region. So the climate of an area is going to take all of those day-to-day conditions and average them together, so you come up with a more similar environmental climate. So you'll be able to say, I live in this climate, or I live in this climate. My climate is dry, my climate is cold, my climate is wet. That's what climate is going to refer to. Climate is caused by trapping of heat by the atmosphere, latitude, and we'll talk about what latitude is if you don't remember from some of those elementary social studies lessons, transport of heat by winds and ocean currents, the amount of precipitation, and the shape and elevation of land masses. So all of these things are going to contribute to what is climate. The first key concept question that we have in our notes today is, how does the greenhouse effect maintain the biosphere's temperature range? The answer you need to write down is that atmospheric gases that trap the heat energy of sunlight and maintain Earth's temperature range include carbon dioxide, methane, and water vapor. All of these things contribute to that greenhouse effect and contribute to the temperature range and how the Earth is able to maintain certain temperatures at certain times of the year. The natural situation in which heat is retained by the Earth's atmosphere is called the greenhouse effect. So if you look at the picture here, you see that we have the Earth's surface and it's surrounded by the atmosphere, and we have the sunlight that comes down to Earth. So it's going to come down and it's going to hit the land where we live. Some of that is going to bounce back off into the air. Some of it's going to get absorbed by the Earth and it's going to stay and warm us up, and some of it is going to bounce back off up into the atmosphere. At that point, when it goes back up into the atmosphere, some of the heat is going to escape out into space, but some get trapped by these greenhouse gases. So these gases that we just talked about, the carbon dioxide, the methane, the water vapor, they're going to trap that heat and help to heat the Earth up. That is the greenhouse effect. How does latitude affect climate? When the solar radiation, when the sun comes down, the rays come down and they hit Earth, solar radiation is going to strike different parts of the Earth's surface at an angle that varies throughout the year. So depending on where the sun is, how it's turned, what season it is going to determine how that sunlight hits the Earth's surface. At the equator, energy from the sun strikes the Earth most directly. So that's why we know that the land masses that surround the equator are going to have the hottest, warmest temperatures during the year. At the north and the south poles, the sun's rays strike the Earth's surface at a lower angle, so they are going to be the colder parts of the Earth. Next key concept question, what are Earth's three main climate zones? Well, as a result of the differences in latitude, remember that's where we have the lines that go horizontally around the Earth. So as a result of those differences, and thus the angle of the sun coming and heating the Earth has three main climate zones: the polar, temperate, and tropical zones. And here is what that looks like. So as you can see, the most direct sunlight is going to hit around the equator. That's going to be the tropical zone in the middle of the Earth. The temperate zone is going to be above and below that, and that's where it's warm sometimes but cold other times. That's where we live. And then you're going to get the coldest parts up at the North Pole and the South Pole, where the angle of the sun is the most severe of the angles. It's the least direct and the most severe. So those are going to be the coldest parts of the Earth. The polar zones are cold areas where the sun's rays strike the Earth at a very low angle. These polar zones are located in the areas around the North and South Poles between 66.5 degrees and 90 degrees north and south latitude. The temperate zones sit between the polar zones and the tropics. The temperate zones are more affected by the changing angle of the sun over the course of the year. These are going to be the parts of the Earth that have four distinct seasons, like where we live: winter, summer, spring, and fall. As a result, like I said, the climate in these zones range from hot to cold depending on the season. The third zone, which is the tropical zone or the tropics, is near the equator. This is between 23.5 degrees north and 23.5 degrees south latitudes, right through the middle of the Earth. The tropics receive direct or nearly direct sunlight year-round, making the climate there almost always warm. It's a great place to vacation if you like warm weather. So how does the heat move around the Earth? Why is it cold in some parts and cold in the other, and how come the seasons change? What happens is you get this unequal heating of the Earth's surface, and that drives wind and ocean currents. And these transport heat throughout the biosphere. So for example, as you can see these arrows, these are going to be the winds. This is usually the way that the wind goes. There might be variations depending on different weather patterns and what might be going on, but normally where you see the red arrows, that's the way that it points. So we've got wind that blows away from the poles and goes toward the equator. And then in the temperate zones, you've got winds that go opposite. So there's a lot of opposites that go if you look really closely at that. Similar patterns of heating and cooling occur in Earth's oceans. The cold water near the poles sinks to the bottom and then flows parallel to the ocean bottom and rises up in warmer regions. So when it's cold, when the water is cold, that's going to sink down to the bottom and move along the bottom, and when it gets towards warmer air masses, it'll come back up towards the top again. The water is also moved around at the surface by winds, and we know these as the waves that we see. The movement of this water creates ocean currents, which transport heat energy throughout the biosphere. Surface ocean currents warm or cool the air above them, affecting the weather and climate of nearby land masses. That's what helps warm things. So if we look at this picture, you've got the warm currents in the red, and they move around the different parts. And then you've got the cold currents that generally move opposite directions that the warm currents are moving. So everything's being moved around. Cold water is going to be moving towards warm water, and the warm water moves back around towards the cold water. Okay, so here's our learning objective review then for this section. The first question is, what are the causes of climate? Well, if we go back to the beginning, we know that climate is caused by the trapping of heat by the atmosphere, latitude, transport of heat by winds and ocean currents, the amount of precipitation, the shape and elevation of the land masses. So you will have to go back to the beginning of these notes to be able to fill this in. The next question is, how is Earth's temperature range maintained? And the atmospheric gases that trap the heat energy of sunlight and maintain the temperature range. So the carbon dioxide, the methane, the water vapor that are all part of that greenhouse effect, this is how the temperature range is maintained by those atmospheric gases trapping that heat in the atmosphere. And the third question that we have to review is, what are Earth's three main climate zones? And the climate zones that we learned about today are temperate, tropical, and polar. So make sure you go back through your notes so you can get the answers for those and that we can put this in our interactive science notebook. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.